I think we're about ready, Jim.
Yeah, I think so as well too. Then let's get started. Jobs to be done. Well, a job is something that the customer is trying to get done, but very often we use the field of jobs to be done, JTBD, as an approach, as a framework, as a methodology. And I think it's more than just that. It can actually be a unifying force. It can become a common language across teams, right? Because ultimately, innovation is a social process. And it doesn't matter what kind of eureka answer you got from your brainstorming, that sticky note is not going to move the hearts and minds of the people around you. And I think Jobs to be Done has the potential to unify and rally people together. And hopefully that's what we're going to be talking about with our special guest today, Alex Cottrell from Zurich. But before we get to Alex, my name is Jim Callbeck. I am the author of the Jobs to be Done playbook and the co-founder of the Jobs to be Done toolkit, along with Elaine.
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Mathias. I'm also one of the co-founders of the Jobs to be Done toolkit. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to have these conversations every month. And last year, it was just like one of the highlights for me of, connecting with the community and hearing about how people are using Jobs to be Done. So here we are. We're back doing the same thing in 2024. The last Tuesday of every month, we'll be here. Just a couple of quick agenda items to get us started for today. We have a couple of updates that I'll go through related to the toolkit. Then Jim will introduce our guest, Alex, and then the last 30 minutes or so will be a Q&A where you guys can all ask questions of Jim and Alex about anything really Jobs to be Done related or anything that was covered in Alex's presentation. With the questions, what we like to do, is this where I go into the questions, Jim? With the questions, what we typically do is we collect the questions in the chat. So if you just, as you're hearing things or as there are things you'd like to comment on, post them in the chat. I'll move all of them over into the mural canvas. And then at the end of the last 30 minutes, we can go through the questions. You can come on stage if you'd like to engage in the conversation directly. We'll just ask you to unmute. Pretty straightforward. We'll just moderate the conversation as we go. Okay, now back up to the previous item. Yeah. Yes. All right. So a couple of things. We have a new course, the Foundations of Jobs to be Done, the core framework. So this is building on the Jobs to be Done Canvas 2.0. And the idea is we've really taken everything that we've learned over the past couple of years through the Jobs to be Done toolkit and Jim has updated the canvas. And then we created this new video learning course with about 2 hours of lecture, demos, different training resources to really show you how to use the toolkit, how you can put it into practice and get started with Jobs to be Done at your organization or on your next project. Is there anything you want to add, Jim?
No, just that it's new material, so you won't find it in the book. We've discussed some of it here, but it's really a fresh new course. So tell all your friends.
Yeah. And then our next Untangled will be the last Tuesday of February on the 27th. I will post the registration link in the chat so everybody can get that on their calendar. And we hope you'll keep coming back.
Yeah, and this is an open community call. So like Elaine said, we're just doing a regular quote unquote Zoom here. It's not a webinar. So you can mute and unmute, and we ask you to stay muted while you're not talking. But when we get to the Q&A, you can turn your webcam on and join the conversation. This is supposed to be kind of an open meetup-like format in terms of the style here. So without further ado, Alex, welcome.
Thanks a lot, Jim. Thanks, Elaine. And hi, everyone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you for, I think, 25 minutes about how we've adopted Jobs to be Done in the innovation process. So I suppose what I'm going to do is I'll just give you a bit of background. Let me just share first.
Okay, let me stop sharing my screen and I'll let you take over. Okay, we're seeing your screen now.
Yeah, all right, perfect. So I think a bit of background. So we were I'm principal leader for the Innovation Foundry. It's the innovation function in Zurich, UK. And I think, yeah, what I wanted to do is to take you through our journey with Jobs to be Done. We deep dived a lot into it. It is almost a religion, and I really think it kind of should be, to be honest. certainly to change a culture. And it's kind of the central thing which is most important to us and most creates that kind of outcome-driven culture within an organization. So let me just show you how we've.
And Alex, before you dig in, I don't know if you have this as part of your presentation, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about Zurich, because I'm not sure everybody realizes Zurich Insurance, and then your role in your team, just to set the stage.
Yeah, absolutely. So Zurich Insurance.
You had a slide there, perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so Zurich Insurance is part of the Zurich Group, which weirdly enough is a company based in Zurich. And it's Zurich Insurance is the top 10 largest insurer in the UK. I think it's number 7 according to Wikipedia, but it employs more than 4,500 people in the UK, a lot more all over the world. As I said, it's part of the Zurich Insurance Group, which is headquartered in Switzerland, and it's quite an old company. And actually, that's pretty relevant to the conversation. A lot of obviously legacy companies, they're not founder led, and the culture from one person, and so a lot of it is making sure that we can create that culture from inside a legacy company. So it was founded in 1872. And they then founded Zurich UK 50 years later in 1922. So we've only recently had our 100-year anniversary. So an interesting thing about me, well, if that's interesting, is and my team is that we are not from I'd say traditional backgrounds of UX design and product management. I have always been in IT, never written a line of code in my life, but basically I started my job as my career as a business analyst working for Penguin Books and their company, head office company, Pearson Education. And one of the good things about that was that I got a lot of interesting projects. One, to create the first parallel ebook and printed book project to go on the Kindle and other devices like that. Got a real taste for agile. There is definitely a movement, and that agile move was because I really felt that there wasn't a huge amount of customer engagement when it came to waterfall projects, and quite a lot of customer focused projects were waterfall in that respect, but obviously that was a long time ago, and it's changed since then. So I moved to an agile consultancy called BJSS based in the UK. And I managed to, I got the opportunity to work for a lot of industries like Virgin Media, Foreign Office, which was really interesting, and global commodities trader. And then from there, I moved into Zurich Insurance for my kind of agile knowledge, and then transitioned from business analysis into innovation. And I think what I found from years in innovation is that we need to always borrow from and have that mindset of design and product management. So that said, that's me and the company. And Zurich Insurance, they are basically go from insuring one person to insuring some of the biggest companies in the world, basically, and municipal areas like local authorities, educational institutions. So they cover everything, really. So us as an innovation function, so why do we exist? So really quickly, we existed because we operate well here. So again, sometimes legacy companies, they will have more traditional disciplines like business analysis and obviously project management, things like that. But applying the different disciplines to the different types of project is really important. We've got lots of regulatory governance type change, low levels of ambiguity, but we really need something where you can operate in high levels of ambiguity as well, which is where we come in. Not just us though, we need to create a culture of that ability to operate in that as well. And so really this means being scientific. As I'm sure you all know, it's about making sure we're aligning to strategy, understanding the customer needs, making a hypothesis of value, evidencing that value and observing it through the problem, the solution, and the experimentation. We apply that approach through these kind of things. So we create new value, obviously the kind of the 0 to 1. We add value to existing products and services using design and product management type techniques. New partnership assessment, using jobs to be done, internal problem solving, training, consultancy. So that's our remit, and that helps us to create a culture of change when it comes to that, as well as not just working on propositions ourselves. So yeah, so this is our process. So we understand the customer through customer insight. We create a very clear vision. We understand the customer's problem, create differentiated solution. Once we understand that problem, test it rapidly, build and prove, grow and scale. So, you know, what I'm saying is lean UX, lean startup, you know, lots of approaches which obviously are very common nowadays. So customer development to product development. And then this is what it kind of looks like. So you identify the opportunity, you refine it through customer validated engagement, you build it once you've done your prototyping, your assumption validation, you get your product market fit, hopefully, or not, you know, that's where fail fast comes in, and then you grow and scale. So what's our journey with jobs to be done? So I'm going to show you how we use jobs to be done throughout all of those areas, and how it's the focal point, almost the sun with where the gravity should always be pulling into. It's the one thing which is always common with what we do, and obviously starting with the problem first is where it all starts. So first of all, we create the product vision, and we do that by and why do we create the product vision? It's a very quick process, and because if you work for a large company, there are lots of people that have lots of ideas. Some of those ideas are slightly out of focus, and they're probably solution based, some of them as well. And if someone comes to us with a solution, we always reverse it back to the problem. Therefore, jobs to be done. And so what we do is we run a workshop to understand the customer, the progress they want to make, the struggles that they think they have to get the job done, and what a new customer experience would look like. And we put this all into a future press release, the Amazon way of articulating a product vision. And we start with a hypothesis. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and sell to you that we are using jobs to be done throughout everything we do, basically. So we always start with a hypothesis statement. Here's, what did I say? This is Uber and Peloton. So we believe that urban dwellers, so the customer and an actual segment who need to get from point A to B, so that's the trigger that triggers the job to be done, are looking for solutions to, and then the job to be done, so be transported to their destination and some kind of context. Again, focusing on the actual customer, and then the job trigger and the job to be done is always the first step. And it's amazing how that's a bit of the first like mic drop moment where you're basically articulating the customer and the job they're trying to get done in that way, and starting it as a hypothesis. And then we do this all, sorry, plug Jim for Mural, but we do all this in Mural now, and our workshop is understanding that hypothesis. And once we understand that, we go from problem space to solution space. And this is where we first introduce them to the jobs to be done. We get them to brainstorm the steps that they think that the customer takes in relation to the job to be done. And remember, a lot of our teams will engage with customers themselves, but obviously this isn't from the horse's mouth, but it means that we can get a very quick product vision quickly. So identify and brainstorm the steps. Once you have the steps and you've aligned them, then we brainstorm the struggles when they're doing performing those job steps. And obviously this is just standard jobs to be done in a certain extent. And then we vote on which are most important and least satisfied. It's just a binary vote, which they are defining in 2 dimensions in that point, but we're flexing their important satisfaction muscle at that point. And then you obviously pop out the main needs, underserved needs, which we turn into how might we switch to design thinking, and then we get them to ideate on these solutions and do lightning demos and get inspiration and get those kind of localized solutions, and then sketch a starts to finish customer experience, which amazingly everyone engages with really well. We've had hundreds of people sketch in quite an old company, I mean, our teams are amazing and our colleagues are brilliant, and they've just absolutely jumped to this, which is amazing. And then we turn the storyboard into a future press release. And for anyone that doesn't know it, they always define Amazon a future press release as a product which is live, basically, in the future. So a headline, subheadline, the problem statement, and the solution. But ones I've seen in the past, the problem and the solution, that I suppose in a way they're not always very structured or structured enough when it comes to the problem. They're quite fragmented sometimes. But once you've gone through that workshop, you have your needs, you've got your struggles, you just articulate them in the problem part, and then you know the needs that relate to the problems and the solutions, which means you can very succinctly, in a traceable way, put them in the solution part, and you've got a very easy to read product vision at that point. So that's the first foray into jobs to be done is the one-day workshop, and we obviously spend a lot of time articulating how importance and satisfaction is, and how that's opportunity and differentiation, and so they're getting under the skin of that. And then at that point, it becomes more traditional jobs to be done. We've done a lot of the thinking, and now we need to interview customers and we need to survey them. So we interview between 5 and 15 for about an hour, and then 100 to 1,000 in customer surveys. And we use user Zoom or user testing, or I think they've merged now. And from the first stage, what we do is we've spent so long on identifying the customer, the job to be done, and the context, that we really have got under the skin of that, and we're pretty clear on what that is. However, what we assume, the job trigger, the steps and the struggles, they just go away at that point, because I mean, they're still in the press release, but they're probably inaccurate. But at least they've given a very clear articulation of the first product vision that we think. And then we interview customers, and we do, you know, normal customer interviews. We make sure that they are that they're accessing their memories as opposed to their hypotheticals, and we step them through the what next, and the hows and the whys, and the struggles, and the functional, social, emotional, and we make sure we're stepping through all of that. And what we don't have, obviously, is underserved need, and that's what we need next. And so we do our important satisfaction, which we spend a long time crafting those questions, so people aren't just pressing 6 all the time because they just don't understand the question. And that starts to create that differentiation. And when you talk to the business and say, look what the customers have given you, that's your opportunity. We've done none of this. We have just facilitated for our customers have done that. The light bulbs start to pop at this point. And obviously at that point we go into solution mode, which is less relevant for this conversation. And we identify features to needs and new customer experience, and then we start to prototype, and we do the business model, and we raise the assumptions, and we spend a lot of time in solution space making sure. But obviously everything has come from the job to be done and the underserved needs. So this is quite mind-blowing when it comes to, you know, let's say product development, when you just start to develop. The fact that we haven't developed by this point, and we at this point we understand the target market, the segments, the opportunity sizes by doing this work. We've engaged with probably between 1,000 and 2,000 customers in some way, whether that's qualitative or quantitatively, and we've also validated in the background that it's feasible and viable, and we absolutely know what the bet is for an MVP. And I'm using that in a kind of a slightly the MVP being a pilot as opposed to an experiment. Well, it's obviously experimental pilot, but that's what we're going to build next. And we also have an outcome-based roadmap, and, you know, absolutely business want outcomes, and we are able to give them that. So that's our bread and butter. That's propositions, basically. But how do we scale this to all? Because at that point, it will be a few of us engaging with a product team. It's not 4,500 people. So how are we scaling this mindset of jobs to be done? So the first thing that we've done is we turn it inwards, and we solve business problems. So if we've got, let's say, an issue with talent retention or anything pretty heavy and and important that you need to create new value for, we've created something called the innovation sprint, which probably confusing calling it a sprint, but ultimately it's solving their own problems. And by solving their own problems, they're starting to understand jobs to be done and how it is a very human-centered approach. So we use classic double diamond. We get them to articulate a very negative pain point of something is not working, so that we can identify the themes, interview in hour-long interviews the employees who are experiencing this pain point. And again, once we've done that, we do our underserved needs with whoever a larger population is. And what they are, and the penny drop at this point is they are understanding that because we're starting with the problem, they are again giving us identifying their needs, and they're having a say in which underserved needs are most important. So they are bought in. They are absolutely bought into the problem, because we can absolutely say, you guys have done this yourself. You've raised your problems and you've prioritized them. So let's go to solutions with confidence. At that point, we can't boil the ocean. We can't identify all of their needs. They're not a job to be done. They are multiple jobs to be done. So we're just identifying, but that's in a smaller sense. A lot of the changes are potentially operational changes, different engagements, those kind of things. So they ideate on the solutions to this, and they effort impact them. So we're introducing them to design thinking as well, which is a great thing. And then experimentation at that point. So how would you put this experiment live in a reversible, piloted way, basically? And once they've solved their own problems, they absolutely understand the concept of jobs to be done in the problem space, ideating on different solutions, making those bets and experimenting in reversible ways. So we are creating that muscle memory for if they're going to work in propositions as well. So as you can see, this is you've got a huge amount of problems here, all themed contributing factors. We're prepping the surveys. We've got our underserved needs, so we're able to identify where the underserved needs are and which ones the sponsors should be focusing on, and then multiple solution options for those needs. So again, the crux of jobs to be done, but solving their own problems, not product. This is a really cool one. We call it so new partnership assessment is going back to go forward. So if you have a pilot, classically, let's say that you've got a startup scale up and you want to partner with them, a lot of the time you pilot. And if you pilot, high risk, could be very slow. You can actually kill the startup because of your governance process, which takes much more time than they have money to get through. So let's do something different. Let's identify the needs, the features, and then map them back to the needs, and then test the problem and identify the customer. So, obviously if you're piloting, you don't have understanding of needs, and you don't really know who the customer is in detail. So we do all of the stuff I talked about before. And Uber is an example. So the feature is seeing where the car is on the map, rating system, integrated payments. Each of these has a direction of travel, a benefit, and a desired outcome, which is focused on a struggle. And a lot of these are struggles that I have with taxi companies. So that's what we call reverse ideation. So you're basically moving it back from the solution to the problem, and then testing that as an importance and satisfaction. As you can see on the right, this is a real one. This is a warning flag, basically. This shows, for instance, and gives us a lot of, this is something we were developing, that the needs are very important, but they are pretty happy with how they are addressing those needs. And so what you'd expect from that is something which is not probably going to be a slam dunk. It probably is going to be a slow burner. And we saw that. It was like seeing into the future. We saw that it was something which was just moved slower. It wasn't something that was absolute winner. This is really cool, actually. I think that this way of identifying the pilot is great. And consultancy. So what we also do is obviously workshop, we facilitate, and ultimately this is the lowest bar. We go to any team and we basically say, in 2.5 hours of the day, you you can solve your problems. It's not the hippo, it's not the highest paid opinion in the room saying, let's do this solution. Everyone has a say with a double diamond in problems and solutions, and they solve their own problems very quickly. And if we federate this way of thinking, then we get them on the path, basically, the gateway. And finally, we train this all out. I think for us to create that culture of jobs to be done and innovation, they have to understand the skills themselves. And we've made the bar very low. So the first proposition engagement would be 1.5 days, and then more detail on exactly how to do jobs to be done. We did the first one today, in fact. The qualitative part today, quant next week, going into solutions experiment. And then we will co-create with them. So once they have those skills that we have, we will make sure that we go with them and we solve their problems. So the full stack basically looks like this. For us, we do our workshops for 2.5 hours or so. They understand that they have to focus on the problem and then the solution, but problem first. At that point, between 1 and 2 months, let's solve some really meaty internal problems using jobs to be done in the problem space. Once you've done that, it's pretty easy to then move to understanding how to do that for customers and create new customer propositions. And then innovation training is basically, okay, you want more of this, get into the training. Or obviously you can go down that up the route of being able to ideate, understand design thinking and jobs to be done. So for us, we have to affect the culture as the innovation team. And I know that's a bit naff sometimes, that innovation teams always say that. It is absolutely integral to what we do, so that they understand the benefit, and they understand that, you know, this creates this kind of customer development, then product development, as opposed to let's just build. And it's a lot of fun, and we've had a lot of success, and I hope a lot more to come. So that's
fantastic. Thanks so much for that description. I think it really puts jobs to be done in context, right? Elaine and I have always tried to show that jobs to be done is just part of an overall process, and it's also just part of a team as well too. So I love bringing design thinking and how it fits into lean and all those other things. The other thing that we hear a lot too is, oh yeah, great, but Jim, that example that you used is from the consumer space. I'm in a big, thorny, complex B2B space. How does jobs to be done apply? And well, guess what, Alex, you're in a big, complex B2B space as well too. So it really shows that you can adapt it, and I love the way that you adapted it. We have some questions, but Elaine, I have a question. I'm just going to jump in there because I got the mic right now, so I'm going to take advantage of that. The one thing I love, by the way, I absolutely love that let's solve our own problems with jobs to be done. Just to internalize it, right? I mean, obviously you get the problem solved, but then they're soaking in it at the same time before you go out and solve the customer problem. I think that's brilliant, Alex. That's worth an article or something like that. Or yeah, we got to tell the world about that. But I didn't understand. You start with the product vision. Isn't that then biased because somebody, a hippo, or use the term, is going to come in and say, we need an app for Uber, whatever your thing is, and then aren't you biased already? But so why do you start with that concrete thing that you know it's wrong, right? Yeah. Or it's not, it's perfect, right? Why do you start there? Because I mean, what Elaine and I teach is you got a blank piece of paper, who's the performer, who's the job, right? And then you build into it. What function does that product vision box play in your process?
So what we're trying to do is a lot of the time, I think that senior sponsors, they want to know what it will be, if you know what I mean. And if you don't tell them what it will be quite quickly, then maybe you'll get that kind of that kind of bias to let's make it this. Yeah. However, by going too far to begin with, which is that we've created an entire customer experience, right, even before we've talked to customers, we're doing it so that we only really retain the customer segment, the job to be done trigger, the job to be done. We almost wipe everything else out. Yeah, however, what it does is it gets people very excited about the process.
Right.
So the ideation, but I mean, every single part of that day is really cool. It's it's not innovation theater. Where innovation theater is banned in us in what we do. So you know, we don't high five, but basically, ultimately, our view on that day in the product vision is not the product vision. It's that if they want to get to the solution, they have to go through the problem. And actually the most important thing, and we do tell them that the only thing we're retaining is the hypothesis statement almost. That's it of the whole day.
Right. That's fantastic.
But it creates buy-in. The other thing it does do, because we're a highly regulated industry, is that we can take that PRFAQ, which is genius, by the way, but lots of iterations that Amazon did to actually get to that way of articulating things, and you can send it around everyone. And we have, as you said, Jim, we've got a lot of people in our business, and we're because we're highly regulated, we need to make sure our governance and data security and all of these teams are understood. Our group function understands, and they've got the ability to start to question it, and to get that momentum.
Yeah, that's great. I love that you just used the word buy-in, because I imagine there's also like a big social function of coming together and say, we're going to come up with a product vision. Of course, you know, in the background, it's not about the product, it's about the hypothesis that's underlying that. But then there's also this collaborative, collective, it's almost cathartic. Like one thing that I find is it's hard to go into brainstorming or solutioning or even in the problem space if people already have something on their mind, right? So it's almost like, what are you guys thinking about? Let's get it out, and then reverse engineer the hypothesis from there, strip it out, go back and prove it with evidence, and then go forward into the problem space. Is that kind of what you're thinking there, to use that moment in time like that?
So from being in product for my entire career, I think stakeholders get very itchy when they don't see something, and actually we create a storyboard in the first day, and so they're able to say, okay, so those are the needs, and we say these are the needs that this solution is going to address. We make it very clear that it's outcomes and needs, and the solution is just going to be, you know, what that does that. So very, very quickly you start to see what the art of the possible could be. However, we don't, and also if you just do problems in a workshop, it's a little bit dry sometimes.
It's abstract, right? How do you really, it's just a problem, right? But now you got a storyboard and people are talking about a thing, right? Which is a very different conversation. Did I ever mention the book Presumptive Design to you, Alex, in our conversations? There's a book, Leo Frischberg and his colleague, whose name is escaping me right now. They wrote a book called Presumptive Design. And basically what he's doing, he's flipping the design process on its head. And he said, the first thing you do when you come together is make something. Just make something that expresses your vision, right? And he uses pipe cleaners or, you know, eggs in a, like, could be any, just represent the thing that you have on your mind. You do it with storyboards. And then from there, that's your research problem now. That's not the solution. That's your research problem. The thing becomes a stake in the ground for you, the research problem, right? And going into the problem. So it's very similar. We should talk about that later, but presumptive design, you just make a presumption that your starting point is a presumption, right?
So the other thing is exactly, so the solution is a ball of clay. And the assumptions we raise for desirability, feasibility, viability is going to smash that clay into what it should be. And so we just don't care about the solution at that point. However, there are lots of good reasons for having it there. The word pivot, we use that almost every day. My colleagues, Louise and Gaumer, are on the call, and we do a lot of talking about pivoting.
Okay. Quick question before I go to our first question. Do you tell the stakeholders that you don't care about their ideas? And do you say that? But
most of the time, I'd probably put it over to Gaumer and Louise because it could be that I'm constantly doing that or not at all. But I would say what they do is that this is quite an alien process, but it makes sense because it's so human. And so so we get a lot of people trusting us, basically. So we don't tend to say, you know what you've just done there, forget that. It's almost that once we've done the customer interviewing and the customer surveying. Then we go around and we do a storyboard again for the needs. So we go around again, and it's just changed by that point.
Right.
So no one's wedded to that particular.
Right. Yeah. Right. Okay. Fantastic. That's absolutely brilliant. Elaine, let's go to some of the questions. Can you direct my attention? Where do you think we should start?
Yeah, I think Nico has been bringing up some really good questions and commenting on Alex's sometimes response in the chat. Do you want to, Nico, come up and maybe like pose your questions or talk a little bit about answers that you've gotten to the questions that you were asking in the chat?
Sure, yeah, because I actually think a lot of my questions were answered in the last few minutes. So my first question was, you know, when you're brainstorming the steps and the struggles of your target user, and you're kind of using those as your screener for your interviews and who you're going to recruit, all of that is kind of based on assumptions. So I was thinking, how could that negatively impact the outcomes? But it sounds like what you're saying is it all forms this hypothesis, and then the interviews serve to test that hypothesis. And if you find that maybe you were off, you can pivot. Maybe you have to recruit a new set of users. So that, I think that maybe is
it kind of isn't, Nico. I think that the good thing we have as being a really big company is that we've got two things. We've got massive data, and we've got data science. And so what we do is we basically can ask data science to look at our data and then pick out certain things. You know, let's say that it is a hypothesis we're starting with, and there's certain things where we want to see trends in the data. Our data science teams can actually create very accurate personas from the data, and we can pick from those personas basically. And that also gives us market sizes as well, based on those things that those people that, you know, because obviously we've got claims data and we've got policy data and things like that. And so we always start with a data-led approach that creates the hypothesis, as opposed to just saying we're making that assumption. Does that make sense?
Does that cover the, you know, the process, the workshop where you all get together and you identify the steps and the job steps and the struggles associated with each step?
No, that's kind of a stage zero. So that's kind of pre-work that we do. So we sit and we work with the sponsor to identify that, and then what we try and do is get evidence from data that the hypothesis is a good one to start with. Okay. So and you know, lots of data, and if we don't have that data, we almost do a kind of a circular jobs to be done process again to identify customer interviews and things, to identify what jobs are most important to them in that respect. So it's really hard to start with just a baseless hypothesis. We tend to try and get as much data and evidence of need, and we actually we challenge that right at the beginning of the workshop. Is why are we here today? What data do we have that identify that this is a big problem for a customer?
And so is there maybe pre-work that you assign so that people come with, you know, that knowledge, and it's not just a bunch of guesses and assumptions?
To a certain extent, but I think at the moment what we do is we do tend to use data analysis, data science, and quite a lot of data, as much data as possible, if you know what I mean. There's very few that we haven't engaged. We haven't engaged at least, you know, probably about 500-600 customers to understand their kind of joint hypothesis, you know, their shared hypothesis. Yes, but ultimately we have, you know, a large company will have so much data on their customers that good data science will be able to create personas from those.
And that all informs stage zero, like the initial hypothesis. Okay. Yeah. I have another question, but I'll pause and let somebody else go.
I think Wolfram has also had a couple of interesting comments in the chat as well about, you know, this kind of like upfront process of working backwards from the product vision, you know, starting with an idea. Wolfram, do you have anything to contribute or want to ask any questions about that?
Thanks. It was rather a comment. So because I can relate to this situation a lot. So we are often asked to create a specific feature, but the needs and the jobs and all that stuff is like not clear, or the problem space is just skipped. that's why I like this approach Alex showed. We have this also, but we don't have it that clear to start. So to take that idea or the solution, I'm working on a project right now with a similar situation. Take that solution, not reject it, take it and work backwards and find the problems and jobs and all that stuff that relates to that solution, and if they even exist. So it's not a question. I just I like what Alex presented. So yeah, nice.
It's almost so. I suppose the way we think about it is you can retrospectively do this for any. Let's say that you've got funding for 2024, and you've got ideas for different solutions or different features. You can. I feel that a lot of the time it can be the product manager who's obviously going in to do it to implement those. And what's probably missing is there is a feature-based roadmap if you have one. But you come in with these ideas and you test in the problem space. You have an outcome-based roadmap at that point, and then you've got a superpower, and then people listen to you, and you've got a seat at the table.
Yeah, and Alex, I relayed this story just to remind everybody. About a year ago, I guess it was, we had Vito on, Elaine, on Jobs to Be Done Untangled. There's actually a little case story in my book, the Jobs to Be Done Playbook, from Vito. He worked at Zillow. At the time, it was Trulia, but he works for Zillow now. He's a UX researcher. They had gone into ideation, skipping ahead, and they went into ideation for a new effort that was coming out. And they had a dozen or more different ideas, and the team literally couldn't agree on which idea was best, the concrete solutions. And what he did is he expressed the underlying needs as outcome statements from all the ideas that people had. I think it was 20, went out and surveyed the market and came back, associated them back with the ideas, and he said, this idea wins, here's the data on it. So a similar type approach. That was for him, that was more of a band-aid because he needed to get out of it. You're doing this very proactively. And you're saying, no, this is how we're gonna work. We're gonna start with this ideation to reverse engineer our hypothesis, then throw all that other stuff away or put it aside. Let's put it that way. Maybe it'll come back, but maybe it won't. Right after we do the Jobs to Be Done analysis. So I'll point everybody to our Untangled video with Vito. He tells a similar story.
I can provide a link to that.
Okay,
so we
thanks,
have.
Elaine.
Oh, Wolfram, did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to this. So we had exactly the same situation, solution already defined, or the product and some features around it. What I now did, similar to Alex, I didn't reject. So we can support you, PM, and we did some interviews around that feature somehow, solution agnostic interviews, found out a lot of needs. Now we are quantifying these needs from this job and go back to the PM and tell him, look, these are the needs we found out. Maybe out of your 10 features, maybe these two are the better ones because they might address the needs that are underserved as we found out. So yeah, that's yeah. So yeah, thanks. Great.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So Jim, I see we have two questions about, how do you sort of identify whether, or like, what do you do when you have a lot of hypotheses? What if the hypothesis isn't exactly right for the context that you're in? John also had an interesting question building on that about like discovering unmet needs that maybe are beyond the core business needs. Like, how do you sort of deal with finding that balance between the unmet need that's maybe surfaced by some of the innovation work, but it doesn't necessarily align with like the value that the business is trying to provide?
Interesting. We haven't. Okay, so we haven't come across that for customer propositions. What I would say is for internal engagements, for what we call our innovation sprint, when we're solving our own problems, that there are always things that are needs of employees, if you know what I mean, which sometimes there are strategic engagements to sort out or whatever that be. And it could be that there are in-flight things or the business or the senior leadership doesn't want to focus on those particular needs. And I think that's definitely a sponsor's right to basically go, we're not going to touch that because it doesn't align to, you know, our values as a company. Certainly as in insurance companies, we have that a lot when it comes to, you know, the kind of companies to insure and things like that. And obviously we're a highly regulated industry, so there's certain things we absolutely just can't do. So I think that's fine. That will come out in the customer interviews, and we can either exclude them when it comes to asking those important satisfaction questions, because we just don't want to go there. We haven't really had that instance, but I would say that you know, let's say that a sponsor or a product owner, product manager is responsible for features in the old world, and now they're responsible for outcomes. Then at that point, a sponsor is almost having an influence of what features went in the old world, but now they have an influence of what outcomes do or don't get addressed as well. So I think at that point, what we do is we consciously are able to call it out when you have desired outcomes, and you can make those decisions and you have that discussion based on outcomes as opposed to outputs. Is that a roundabout? Did that make sense?
Let's go back to John, Elaine. Does that address your question?
Yeah, it does address the question. I think it was interesting to explore because when I think about insurance, and obviously it's either personal insurance or house insurance or company insurance, whatever it is that the way that I think the immediate reaction I'm going to have with jobs to be done is that nobody wants to buy insurance. What they want is some kind of certainty in the future that they'll be protected against risk. And so this is often the framework that I use, which is nobody wants to buy insurance or a car or and so the car can be replaced by Uber. And the unmet needs question is a clue to what comes next, in the sense that if people don't want to be insured, how do you provide alternative solutions to managing risk, which doesn't follow the kind of traditional insurance company solution?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So a lot of what we do is not insurance. A lot of what we do, and what by saying that, what I mean is it's not protection. There's a lot more to insurance, and a lot of it can be prevention, basically. And that's where you can start to have it, because you're right. Basically, let's say that we've got a recurring usage angle, you know, in the pirate metrics, that we want more recurring engagement with our customer, and our customer's going, I just never want to ever talk to you, ideally, because I want you to have insured me, but I don't want anything to have happened. However, there's a lot. I think a lot of the innovation happens in the prevention space, and also I mean, a lot of our insurance Zurich provides a lot of protection for their customers, probably more than others, to be honest. And one of the things that we want to make sure is that, let's say, commercial clients, as an example, they will get a lot of bang for their buck. Basically, we want to make sure they know everything that they have with us, if you know what I mean. So there's that. We can innovate around that as well, in making sure that that their needs in that regards, actually, they might be addressed by things that we already provide, and therefore we just need to articulate it better. Or, you know, it doesn't need to be a new feature or something. It's just a different comm strategy or whatever that be. But I think that the bigger you get and the more complex you get, the more kind of an elegant. It needs to be a very elegant, nicely weighted solution, if you know what I mean.
I want to draw a couple of attention to a couple of questions that I think continue this part of the conversation. Paul had a question about the important satisfaction grid, because it looks a little bit different than the one he's used in the past. Can you talk a little bit about why it's more narrow around the underserved items?
Yeah, so what I would say, I know what my Jeremy and Louise, their faces are like at the moment because they're on the call, but that's been under a lot of conversation with us. Why why it goes from 10 to 5 is because I think one of the jobs to be done, main people, I think it might be Tony Olwick's grid goes 10 to 5. And so when we started, we were like, okay, so there are three slices. But the more we did it, we were like, why are those slices in those places? How can you justify that to happen? Because it actually, if you do a bit more maths, it drops off. It should drop off at the end down to almost nothing. And then there's an area of opportunity. There's an area of no opportunity right at the top. If it's really, high, 10 importance and 9.3, it's going to be still unsatisfied according to that. So what I would say is, I'm really waiting for some mathematician who loves jobs to be done to be challenging that and actually identifying what underserved really means. I need to be quite transparent. We use it because it's the best that we have, but we have parked a lot of conversations about making it more justifiable in what is underserved. You need to justify that. You know what I mean? Because served right is 0 to 0. It's equal to each other. But underserved, I think there needs to be an entire conversation around that, to be honest.
Great point.
So just real quick, I think ultimately, from where I sit anyway, in the jobs I have to do, it doesn't really matter the precision that goes into it. It's more about getting the conversation started with the product people. So as long as it's borderline or in that sort of underserved area, at least it provides the pathway to have the conversation. Yeah. And whatever happens. If it's underserved, it's underserved. If it isn't, then we can move on to something else. I was just curious, but it jumped out at me that it looks the grid looks a lot different than the one I'm used to using. And I was wondering if there was a specific reason about it. But if the answer is we're having discussions about making it better, then that addresses my question. Thank you.
First of all, I'd love to see yours at some point, Paul. And second of all, I'd love to have that conversation. And I know my team would too. Because one thing that we found is, if you think about insurance, we've got actuaries, underwriters, we've got very analytical, very intelligent mathematicians, or data analysts, or whoever they are, who are also intelligent mathematicians. But ultimately, we've had very little querying. I think we did recently where a steering team were basically just asking why is that there, and I think that's really good. I think that tends to be when we dust it off the conversation and we go, how do we justify this, how do we write it down? But I think there is a better way of doing it, to be honest, so you can justify underserved need. Underserved need is a very human thing, though, I would say. And maybe it's slightly ethereal.
Yeah, and I think, because there's that human component too, I think there's an absolute component to this conversation, but there's also a relative one. And I've gotten into the situation too, where you have underserved needs, and the top 3 or even the top 5 may not distinguish themselves too much from each other, but the second one is relatively more unmet than the 11th one. Yeah. And to Paul's point, what are we going to talk about? Let's talk about the top 3. And by the way, that's not only where the conversation comes in, but that's where strategic filtering might also come in. Because you might say, well, that number 1, there's no way we're doing that because we have a partner that does that, and that would cannibalize that partnership. So even though that was the top number 1, that doesn't mean we're going to go after that automatically, that there are other filters and conversations that relativize it as well too, right? So absolute is one thing, but I think there's a relative component to this. No matter how you slice it, there's always going to be that relative side of things. All right, just a comment from me, Elaine. Didn't mean to.
Yeah, no, that's great. I just
really fascinating. I'm like, this is great, Alex. Thanks so much for bringing this up to the community.
As my team know, I could talk about this all day. I think they could.
Yeah, right. And we got time for another question, at least, Elaine.
I think Fed had a really interesting question about assuring viability. So when you're, sort of developing solutions for these underserved needs, how do you sort of get to the point where you're talking about what is the customer willing to pay? Like, how do you actually quantify the market before moving forward with the solution?
Yeah, in particular, value for money and price. So you can find obviously a gap in the market through underserved needs, but is there a market in the gap? Yes, you need a certain number of people, so that you can get that from the survey analysis. But then, are they willing to pay? Is the other sort of literally the $1 million question. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
So our feasibility assumptions are validated when we know what the solution looks like, the customer experience, because and the reason for that is that we don't know what's going to go into the value proposition, if you know what I mean, and therefore we don't know how expensive it's going to be. And so I think this is where the future press release comes in really well, because obviously we keep it over to once we've done the actual need with the customer, we ideate on the solution, we create the new customer experience. At that point, we're really bringing it to life. We're prototyping it. We're like an industrial machine of desirability assumptioning, basically, at that point, through prototypes and surveys and all of those kind of things. And what happens is that the feasibility, viability assumptions, they weave themselves inside the desirability assumptions. And so it almost feels that because we're obviously trying to validate feasibility, viability at the same time as desirability, it's a very elegant process of validating that the value proposition is desirable in this extent, but almost without a price. At that point, we need to go to finance to understand how much that value proposition is going to cost. At that point, we can put some prices on it, and then we can put it on the prototype and go back out and do the price point assumption. But I would say that is very much in the kind of the assumption mapping stage, which with us is just as fun, I would say. But we don't tend to jump to price point until our finance business partner, whoever it is, has done a lot of number crunching. We understand who the supplier is, or whether or not we're going to develop it, and what the cost of development. You know, that we don't tend to drop to a price point quickly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I imagine it comes out as a range because it's pretty complex. So it's more about probably the payback period.
Yeah.
No, you'll make some money on it. How quick you'll get your money back is another question, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And remember, and it's so important for us to test price points in a prototype. We cannot experiment with price as a highly regulated industry in any kind of actual product, because then you're not treating the customer fairly, and all kinds of things happen at that point that you don't want. So it's definitely the right time to do it. But yeah, it's the weaving of desirability, feasibility, viability assumptions, and which ones we're going to test. And we do an assumption sprint because we need to be very specific about getting as many validated with as many customers and as many internal teams as we can.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dana, that's a great point. Okay, I was going to say, Dana has a good point in the chat too about you know, kind of determining the willingness to pay versus the trade-off for features. Go ahead, Jim.
Oh no, I was just going to wrap us up and thank Alex, but also compliment him. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on as a guest is because you've gone out there and learned about all of this stuff, not only jobs to be done, but continuous discovery and lean, and you've put it into practice, right? I think you've shown more than anybody that I've talked to that not only is this possible and possible in a large organization, but it's actually really helpful and it's really beneficial to make these moving parts work. And I'm sure you have some warts and some failure stories as well too. But I just want to compliment you on a really job well done, Alex.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, this is the center of the universe, jobs to be done. It moves to OKRs, it makes design sprints better, it validates assumptions, it just does everything. It really does.
Right. Fantastic. Elaine, any other points? We're right at the hour. We're actually 1 minute over. So thanks, everybody.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Alex. We'll be back on February 27th. Let me post that link really quickly.
And check out the Jobs to Be Done Toolkit website, and you can find our new course there as well too. Go out and tell all your friends. It's very compact, presents a very concrete process for all of this. So thanks, everyone. With that,
thanks, Alex. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Bye.